Hi guys, it's Monday, and that means it's Jazz Day on Waxing On. Today we're going to look at some music from Miles Davis. And I'll probably do Miles Davis over a series of programs, just because there's such a vast catalog and such a diversity of styles. So today what I'm going to do is just cover three of the albums that were really the first ones that introduced me to the music of Miles Davis. Now, the first album I bought was in the 1970s. And one of my music teachers was talking about Miles Davis, and when I was reading Downbeat, he was prominent in that as poll winner and the records he put out. So I thought I'd give one a try. Again, record stores really weren't all that popular at this time in the early 70s, so most of our records we bought through department stores, so we were kind of limited on what was available. Now, my first exposure to Miles was this album, Miles at Fillmore. I'll just get it so there's no glare. There you go. Great cover, double album. It doesn't give you any details on who was playing, what the songs were, really nothing. And at this point, my exposure to jazz or big band music or even trumpet music was people like Al Hirt, Herb Alpert, the Tonight Show Band, but you only saw them as we went in and out of commercials, unless they had a musical guest, and of course Lawrence Welk. So when I listened to this album, and if you're familiar with Miles' work in the 70s, you'll know where I'm coming from. This was so far out, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I listened to the album a number of times. I've listened to it with one speaker off, so you only heard Miles and less of the background players to try and get a handle on it. And it was really hard for me to really understand what I was hearing. Now, not that I didn't like it, I listened to it a lot and I kept buying a lot of Miles stuff, but for the first exposure into one of the giants of jazz, this was a very odd kind of introduction. Now, it turns out he had some great players on here. We're looking at Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Jack DeJohnette, Dave Holland, a lot of great players. And really what it was he played at Fillmore, which a lot of us were familiar with at that time because of the rock concerts that were going on. This was Fillmore East. Each side of the album was a night. So he did 4 nights there, and basically it was just titled Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday Miles. So there was no indication of songs, nothing special other than the music started, the music stopped. Which, not knowing a lot of the music, sounded pretty much like there were no tunes. It was almost like a half hour of just improvised music. Now, in the later releases on CD, they did identify some of the songs he was playing, and once I went back to some of the albums like Bitches Brew, you recognize some of the songs as well. But there wasn't a lot of information here, and it was what people heard at the concert. Now, in the 1980s, I went to see Miles, and the same thing. Basically, Miles comes out, starts playing, and he stops when he's done. There's no talk, there's no introduction, there's no idea of what he's playing. It's just him up there playing for as long as the concert runs. So anyways, that was my first introduction. But I thought I'll give him another try, see what else he had out. And at that time, Capitol were doing some albums called the Jazz Classics. And this was my second Miles Davis album, Birth of the Cool. Now, this could not have been further away from what I heard at the Fillmore. Again, a landmark album. Miles was changing directions of music. We're just coming off the bop era, and all of a sudden Birth of the Cool was a total opposite of bop. If you took bebop, what Dizzy was playing, and cut the energy and speed in half, and then took that and cut it in half again, you'd be getting close to what was going on with cool jazz. Great people on the album. We've got J.J. Johnson, Jerry Mulligan playing baritone sax and contributing some of the charts, Kenny Clark on drums, Lee Konitz on saxophone, and arrangements by Gil Evans. Now, Jerry Mulligan went on, teaming up with Chet Baker, to do a lot more of this style of music. They became known as West Coast jazz. Some of them called it pipe and slippers jazz. It was very laid back and very different from what was going on in bop at the time, and certainly very different from what I had heard at the Fillmore. So I decided to try another Miles album, and this one caught me because of the cover. And I mean, this is one of the most popular photos, I think most used photos of Miles, and it's from the tribute to Jack Johnson, and it's probably one of my most favorite albums. Similar to Live at Fillmore, each side is a song. It was a soundtrack to a movie that Miles was involved with, but he's got some great sidemen on here. Again, we got Herbie Hancock on keyboard, John McLaughlin on guitar, Billy Cobham on drums, and Michael Henderson on bass. And this time they've identified it as Fender bass because we are getting into the electronic music. A lot more accessible than what Fillmore was. And certainly, if I was looking to get an introduction to what Miles was up to in the 70s, this is an ideal album for that. So all three kind of introduced me to different eras he was playing in, different styles. And Miles, besides being a great trumpet player, was certainly well known for being an innovator. He changed music a number of times over his career. He changed the face not just of his music, but of jazz in general. So we will come back to him in a couple more weeks and just look at some of the other genres he had. I just wanted to give you some idea of the albums I came across in my collection, and these were three of the first ones I had purchased and three that introduced me into the music of Miles Davis. That's it for today. Join us again on Wednesday, when Wednesday is rock and roll. Now we are probably about 8 weeks into isolation. Some of the communities are starting to relax their rules and open up again. But just remember, virus is still out there, so if you can, stay home, stay safe. We'll see you on Wednesday.